Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our October 21st edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today we'll introduce you to Zac Preston, a farmer from Warren County who's helping create opportunities for other young farmers across the state as a leader of Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Advisory Committee. But before we meet Zac, let's touch base with Brian Waddingham of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, who has a timely reminder for livestock farmers. Spokesman editor Tom Block has that story.
Brian, fall is a busy time for farmers, and especially livestock farmers as they work to harvest their crops, begin manure applications, and make sure their farms are ready before the cold weather sets in. But it's also a good time for those folks to take a look at their farms and make sure they're in compliance with all those rules and regulations that apply to their farms, and just be ready in case they were to be inspected by the DNR or EPA. So just to start off with, what steps should a farmer take to make sure that they're in compliance and would be ready for an inspection?
Yeah, I would say out of an abundance of caution, they can call the coalition. We can visit with them over the phone if they have some specific concerns, or even better, we can come right out to the farm and walk around the farm with them and really take a look at the production area where the animals are being raised, if they have feed storage, and then just any other little things that we would notice that might be of interest of DNR or EPA if they ever did an inspection. And we know inspections are on the rise currently, especially in northeast Iowa. So again, the coalition can come right out to the farm, all at no cost and completely confidential, to help give you peace of mind that your farm would pass an inspection.
Yeah, for those folks who might not be as familiar with the coalition, just tell us a little bit about your team and what you do with services you offer. And like you said, it's all confidential and free of charge.
Yeah, so Iowa's 9 major farm and commodity groups help support us, and that makes it possible for us to go out, visit with livestock farmers at no charge, keep those conversations completely confidential. But what we do, really, it falls into one main focus, and that is to grow Iowa's livestock industry successfully and responsibly. And we do that in 4 key areas. Number 1 is interpreting the more than 250 pages of rules and regs that apply to livestock farms today. Number 2, we find the best sites for those new barns and feedlots. Thirdly, we work to enhance neighbor relations. And then finally, we work to implement best management practices such as planting trees through our Green Farmstead Partner Program.
As you mentioned, inspections are on the rise. If a livestock farm is going to be inspected, how does the farmer become aware of that? And how do they know if the person who's calling is actually from the DNR?
Yeah, great question. So what will happen is if DNR gets a complaint, they have to follow up, and they will follow up with you right away, and they will be out sooner than later, usually within 24 to 48 hours. Otherwise, if DNR has a question about your specific farm, they will call you or maybe even leave something on the door handle of your house or your pickup that says, hey, we have some questions. We didn't look at your farm today, but please call us at your earliest convenience. We've just got a few questions about your farm. And then you give them a call. And if they do have concerns based on something you said on that phone call, or maybe you're over a threshold of animal units, they will then schedule a farm visit with you. And it's, like I said, usually a week or 2, nothing too pressing as long as it's not a complaint by somebody else.
Now, when you get a phone call like that, that can be a little unnerving. So let's talk a little bit about what farmers can expect during the inspection. Walk us through the details of what it's going to entail and the things that the farmer should be doing then in the moment with the inspector on their farm.
Yeah, so when that inspector comes out, we would recommend always having another person with you, whether that's a spouse, sibling, other family member, or even a hired hand to go around with you and the inspector. Never let the inspector tour your farm unattended. And while they're looking at things, they'll be asking you questions. So just answer those questions as honestly as you can. It is okay if you don't know the answer to a question that you ask them. I need a little more time to follow up on this, or I need to ask my attorney if this is confidential information. Maybe you've got a biosecurity plan that prohibits DNR accessing certain areas of that farm, especially on hog and poultry farms. That is a concern. So, keep an open mind when you're touring with the inspector. I would also recommend if they stop and take a picture, you stop and take a picture as well, and just really kind of document everything that they do. And then at the end of that inspection, you can ask for an exit interview. Say, hey, what did you see? What did you find? I just want to make sure I captured everything that we talked about today. And then always request a copy of that inspection report, which usually will take a few days, maybe a week for them to get back to you. But always a good idea to get that. And then my last piece of advice would be don't sign anything without legal counsel taking a look at it.
What are the main areas that farmers should be aware of in regard to compliance? You mentioned a few of them, but let's really dig into some of those key factors that you can be preparing for ahead of time, even before an inspection.
I've got really 6 common areas to be aware of today. Number 1, you want to make sure you've got separation to water sources, and that would include your drinking water well, creeks, rivers, and sometimes even grassed waterways if they have defined bed and banks. That could be a concern. Also, separation from neighbors. Any confinement building with over 500 animal units needs to have separation from a neighbor. And then the way you count animal units, just remember different species of animals raised in the same housing system would be counted together. So, for example, if you've got a 2,400 head hog barn along with a 400 head cattle feeding confinement, those numbers would count together and could throw you up into a different animal unit threshold, which would then signal more rules and regulations to follow. The 4th one would be soil types, karst soil, especially when you get into northeast Iowa. You need to do some extra work and surveying there before you can build. And then also floodplains. You cannot build a livestock facility in a floodplain. So again, you also want to make sure that you check for that. And then finally, the last one revolves around manure management plans. If you have more than 500 animal units, you need to have a plan and follow that plan. And along with that, if you're going to be applying your own manure, you need to have an applicator license to do so. So just a few things that we're really keeping an eye on and we can come out and visit directly with you about. But again, just out of an abundance of caution, let's make sure we've got all of our I's dotted, T's crossed, and you'll fly through that inspection.
Yeah, as you mentioned, with those 250 pages of rules and regulations, and there's changes, there's updates. If a rule has changed in the past year or 2 years, farmers could think they're in compliance and not be in compliance. So another good reason you guys are always on top of those and monitoring those rule changes.
Yeah, we've had several rule changes. You go back as far as 98, 2003, 2008, and then again just this summer, DNR updated some of their rules. So, if you are coming back to the family farm and your dad built something one way or your grandpa built something one way, there's a good chance that you can't do it that way today. So it's always a good idea to have a second set of eyes come out and visit with you a little bit and kind of walk you through those plans. And probably even more importantly, interpret how those rules and regulations impact you and what you're planning to do.
And it's important to be proactive. That's the best advice. But if somebody gets a call and the inspection is coming sooner than they can get you guys out there, you guys have a lot of resources online. What resources are there out there that farmers can access, and how can farmers find those?
Yeah, if you go to supportfarmers.com, click on the resources tab, we have several drop-down menus there containing rules and regulations for confinement farms. There's also some information on open feedlots and what's required of them by state and federal agencies. You got information about our Green Farmstead Partner Program if you want to plant some trees, but a lot of it just has to do with kind of giving you an overview of what the rules and regulations are. And I know with 250 pages, and they can be interpreted differently on one farm versus another. If you've got the time, it's always a good idea to try to get us out there pre-inspection, and even after the inspection, we can come out and provide some recommendations as to what DNR or EPA told you needed fixed. And we always try to do that the most efficient way as possible, but also try to do that in a way that's not going to impact your pocketbook, and also get it done sooner than later, just because DNR will follow back up, usually within 90 or 180 days, depending on what time amount they gave you. But it's something you want to take serious and get done as soon as possible.
How about any other tips or advice before we wrap up here? You mentioned there that if an inspector does flag some areas of concern, they will follow up, so it's important to come into compliance.
Yeah. One thing I would stress is that all farms have rules today. It doesn't matter what type of livestock you're raising. It doesn't matter if it's in confinement or open lots, on pasture. There are rules today that apply. So a quick phone call to the coalition can really make a difference, especially if you are going to be inspected by DNR or EPA in the near future. And again, our services are all free and confidential.
Brian, you've given us some really good information and things for livestock farmers to be thinking about. If folks want to get a hold of the coalition, you mentioned the website, but give that to us one more time, or a phone number that they can call.
Yeah, they can always call us at 800-932-2436, or they can also find out more about us and contact us at supportfarmers.com.
If you raise livestock and you'd like a second set of eyes on your farm, it pays to call Brian and the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. You just heard Brian say that all of Iowa's livestock farmers face rules that they need to comply with, whether you're raising animals in a barn, in a feedlot, or on a pasture. And with more than 250 pages of rules and regulations, the free, confidential assistance of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers is something you should definitely tap into. To get started, head out to supportfarmers.com or call 800-932-2436. Now let's head to Warren County, where spokesman editor Tom Block recently visited with Zac Preston, a young farmer and precision planting expert who's also the chair of Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Advisory Committee. Tom Block will take it from here.
Zac, thanks for taking some time to talk to us here on the podcast. For starters, let's talk a little bit about yourself. You've got a young family, you're engaged in farming and also off-farm employment, so you've got a lot going on. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I guess I work full-time at Reynolds Ag Solutions. We're a precision planting dealer, and then we also sell liquid fertilizer and run a shop, and then I farm with the owner of the company, Blake. My wife, Alyssa, is still working at Iowa Corn. We have two kids, Jalen and Jackson. Jalen is going to be 7 and Jackson's going to be 4. That's pretty much the quick and dirty of it. But
yeah, what's your background? Are you a Warren County kid? Did you grow up on a farm? And how did it lead you to where you are today on your career journey?
So I originally grew up in Carlisle, so I actually lived in Polk County, but attended school in Warren County and pretty much did everything in Warren County. Went off to Iowa State after high school. That's actually where I met Blake. We lived together at the AGR house at Iowa State, and just through actually coming back and helping with the county fair, I was able to talk with him and kind of put the whole thing together, and it's somehow been 11 years now, and that's what brought me back. And I met Alyssa up at Iowa State, and we decided to settle here in Indianola. So,
did you have a connection to farming then when you were growing up, or would you study there at Iowa State?
I grew up on a farm. We did row crop to start out with, and then as I came up through 4-H, we got into livestock a little bit, had some show calves and things of that nature. Had a small herd, and then as I went to Iowa State, I started off in ag engineering and then switched into ag systems technology through my career there at Iowa State. That's kind of what led me into what I'm doing now with the planters and the tech side of things.
Zac, you and your wife both have full-time jobs in addition to farming a little bit yourselves and the kids. How do you balance those things and keep everything on track?
We try our best to keep it on track. It seems like sometimes that's the biggest task, is keeping it all moving forward. We try to stay ahead as much as we can, but we take it as it comes. Try to focus on our priorities and focus on the things that matter to us the most. And sometimes the small details slip through the cracks, but we try to keep moving forward as best we can.
That's good advice. Drawing from your own experiences as well as those from your friends and your peers around here, what are some of the biggest challenges you see facing young farmers today?
I guess my biggest thing I always kind of go back to is, and it's probably not just a young farmer thing, but it seems like it's more inflicted on the young farmers, is having that time and resource balance of when an opportunity comes along, do we have the financing or do we have the ability to move forward with it? And then the hard part of that is finding that I guess, balance of when the time's right and we have that resources behind us to make it work. And it seems like the opportunities are few and far between, as they are in farming, no matter what age you are, but especially starting out with really from nothing, or if you do have some backing, which is nice, but getting that put together all at the same time seems to be the struggle for most.
What are some solutions to those challenges or ideas you have to overcome challenges, or ways that you're seeing people make it work?
I think there's opportunities out there to be watching for. I mean, I know a lot of people are taking advantage of the young farmer programs. There's a lot of young farmer programs that are out there that, whether it's through FSA or any government programs and some private programs, I think there is a push to help young farmers get started, but finding those resources at times may be the hard part. So I'm keeping your eyes open for that, and stay connected within your community. It seems like to me that connection and those resources of who you know and who you talk with and work with within your community are going to probably open up the most opportunities for you.
Sure. Yeah, that's good advice there. You're in your third year now on the Iowa Farm Bureau Young Farmer Committee. Let's talk a little bit about your Farm Bureau involvement. Elected chair of the committee a couple months ago. But before we get to some of your goals, let me back up a little bit and ask, how did your involvement in Farm Bureau begin?
My involvement in Farm Bureau, I was asked to be on the county board and said, yeah, I come back from college 9 or 10 years ago. I was asked, will you come sit on the board? I said, sure, I'll come sit on the board. From there on the county board, moved into treasurer and kind of moved up the ranks. And today I'm holding president right now. But essentially got involved at the county level and just kept taking the opportunities that Farm Bureau provided and moved up from there.
Yeah, like all young farmers, you've got a million things going on. Why do you think it's important, or why was it important for you to be involved in Farm Bureau?
I think it's an organization that, regardless of what you do in farming or agriculture, it has a place for you. And I think it's a very strong organization that has the ability to help a multitude of people in the ag industry. So to me, it's just kind of doing your part and continue to strengthen the organization.
Let's talk a little bit about the committee, your experiences here the past 3 years on the committee, and then some of your personal goals for the Young Farmer Program in this year ahead, activities, things like that.
Being on this committee has been a great experience for me. It wasn't anything that we had on our radar. We attended Young Farmer Conference, and we'd been away for a while because of children and time frames. It just wasn't allowing us to come. We came back to the Young Farmer Conference and was like, we've enjoyed coming these for multiple years. Maybe we should think about stepping up and doing our part. That's kind of what got us into it. So we applied, we got in, not knowing really what we were getting into to a point, but it's been a really great experience. We've met a lot of great people on the committee and within our district and across the state. Once you kind of tie it all together, for me, on the Farm Bureau side of things and trying to get young people involved and eventually get to that policy talk. I mean, we are a policy organization. It's not necessarily something I think in the younger crowd is a hot topic at times when we're socializing and out with our friends, but it seems like in this group, when we bring them together and we get something started, that there is good conversation that happens that does help lead to policy and directions that we need to take the industry.
Have you seen how policies can really start at that grassroots level and build their way up and make a real difference for people, on the farm?
Yeah, that's kind of probably one of the hardest things in my position, to try to explain to somebody that's at the Young Farmer Conference or some young farmer that I've come into contact with, is how a little idea can spur into a big thing if shared amongst the people and that commonality is found that, yeah, hey, I have that problem too, and I'd really like to see it changed. And just submitting that into policy and getting that moving up through an organization like this that will get pushed to legislators and has a pretty high chance after going through the full process, if it's deemed by everybody in the organization that's important, it has a good chance of changing law or changing at least somebody's mindset to go, yeah, we should be looking this direction or that direction. So that's something I've struggled with on how to explain that, because until you see the full thing go from start to finish, it is a hard thing to believe or think, oh, my idea is not worth sharing. Well, usually it is, and usually you're not the only one suffering through that or that it's an issue for, I guess.
Yeah, and that sort of goes back to, you mentioned the networking, and with the resources Farm Bureau has, you meet people from across the state and you can see other people in the same situation. What's the benefit to being able to stay in contact with farmers from different areas of the state, knowing solidarity of people going through the same things that you're going through, even though you might feel isolated?
I think those relationships are some of the ones I've formed even through my career with Farm Bureau. I went through ag leaders, and some of those people I still talk to, and that was somewhere in that 14, 15 time frame. So we're pushing 10 years now, and having that network and having those people we can call, because sometimes it is hard to ask your neighbor, hey, are you struggling with this, or talk about hard things. Whereas if someone's farther away, a lot of times it's nice that that there's a potential they have the same issues you're having, but you're not in direct competition with them or anything like that on the farm. So it provides that place that we can talk about topics that are hard, whether it be transitioning in the farm or how to acquire more ground, or what other guys are doing trying to rent, because talking about that with your neighbor, it kind of feels that you may be in direct competition. So that networking to me really provides things like that. And at the same time, if you are the only one suffering in your area or afflicted with some issue, surely there's somewhere else around the state that is, and finding those people is one thing I think Farm Bureau does really good of connecting people, and especially finding out what their similarities are and where they could help each other.
And we've talked plenty about challenges, but obviously you wouldn't do this if there weren't some optimism. What do you see in terms of opportunities for young farmers? What gets you excited about the future from where you're at?
One thing that I really like to see, and Farm Bureau showcases it well and has helped building, is looking at things differently, finding that way, using your entrepreneurial skills to build your operation to what you need it to be. The traditional, I'm going to rent ground, own equipment, and farm, or build a livestock facility, raise livestock and sell them. That's always kind of a goal. That's the easy thing, but finding things that are different is one thing that the Young Farmer Program really, I think, is kind of showcased well. And Farm Bureau as a whole is how do we get young farmers started, and may not be traditionally what we thought, coming off the farm, and whether it's out of high school or out of college, and just saying you're going to farm full time, that's unless you've got some backing behind you or coming into a family operation, that's a harder thing to just go do. So whether it be grow your future acres opportunity, things like that, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of find other ways to diversify your operation and move into further expansion, whether it be just traditional row cropping or livestock raising, or if you can find a specialty that really suits you.
Now, we're a couple months out yet from the Young Farmer Conference, but you mentioned that you had attended several years ago. And so if there's a young farmer out there listening who's never been to the conference, or even somebody who has, what is it about that conference that really kind of gets people excited?
For somebody new coming to it, I would honestly tell you, it's an opportunity that you really can't lose anything for. Your county's going to help pay for you to go. At the very least, you're going to get some socialization, but more than likely, the people that come and reattend got true value out of it, whether it be our breakout sessions, whether you networked and found those people that we discussed earlier that really relate to what you're doing and make kind of a lifelong friend with them. I'm sure there's people now that have attended the conference multiple years. They don't really even care what the breakouts are. They're going to attend them when they're there, but they're there to see their friends and network and go through. They'll still learn something. They'll still network, and they'll still build that relationship and gain something from it. But I think people keep returning and we keep growing because we're offering pretty much an environment that, regardless of what happens, you don't walk away feeling like you wasted your time.
Outside of Farm Bureau, another thing that you're involved in is the Warren County Fair. What do you do for the fair, and why is that something that you feel like is worth your time?
I am the Buildings and Grounds Chairman for the Warren County Fair, and my wife is a marketing and media manager. I started at county fair because I always liked spending my time at county fair when I was a kid, so I kind of want to again give back and do that. I've built great relationships there as well. To me, it's an organization that it's for the whole county, so it's anything in ag again can happen at the fair. And I started out, it actually helped me lead to where I'm at today in the career, so it kind of goes along with being involved in that community and having that network built behind you.
Thanks, Zach. It's young farmers like Zach and the other leaders of Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Advisory Committee who help ensure that our grassroots organization remains positioned to engage and assist Iowa's up-and-coming farm families with events and resources to meet their evolving needs. One good example of that is the annual Young Farmer Conference in Des Moines. Next year's Young Farmer Conference is January 17th and 18th with registration for that event opening in just a few weeks. To stay tuned for details on the Young Farmer Conference and more, you can visit iowafarmbureau.com/youngfarmers or follow Iowa Farm Bureau's Young Farmer Program on Facebook and Instagram. We've provided links to all of those sites down in the notes for this podcast episode. That's all for this edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next episode on November 4th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.